2 has already mentioned the themes, but to reiterate the main feelings running through In Limbo 2, they are bereavement, loss, sadness, shame, and my favourite, anger. As one author put it, until the referendum, I considered myself an expat. But in 2016, something happened to my beloved homeland. It was split asunder, now taken over by those who oppose everything I value about it, and who despise my fellow Europeans living there. It truly does break my heart. During the last 3 years or so of campaigning, it's become obvious in our group, Brexpats Hear Our Voice, that the subject of our loss of identity, which we Brits never really thought much about, I don't think, it's come to the fore. Much is written in Limbo 2 about it. Mrs. May, who infamously called us all citizens of nowhere, which we took as a personal affront, and which shifted the axis of our self-identity. This is a complex and personal subject, I guess. One size doesn't fit all, but most of the British living in Europe that we've spoken to were comfortable in their multi-layered identity, e.g. I am Welsh, British, and European, no particular order. Now it seems that many are forced to choose between their different aspects of their identity, and to choose between the nationalities they were born with in some cases. Many who are eligible are obtaining other citizenship. Anyone in this room got, because of Brexit? Hands up, I really like to get a good snapshot. Okay, that's quite telling. And of course there are others who are not eligible. So identity is a very important part of the Brexit debate and the conversation around it, and we should not forget it. I'm going to do a quick diversion now about that dreadful word expat, or expatriate. You see my name in the group. Brexpats. Sorry, I'm getting really excited now. It's always like this, I beg your pardon. Okay. So, this name, the Brexpats part, has now become a burden to bear. I formed and named the group on the day of the referendum result before I truly realised the negative stereotypes that the word expat conjures up. I'll leave stereotypes to Sue. But we have asked our group members if we should change the name, because we all hate it really. But the overriding decision was based on feedback that we won't change the name because the name is known and it could be counterproductive. So if anybody say, if you hear anyone say, oh, I'm not joining Brexpats because they've got that awful name, well, everybody hates it. So believe me, as soon as this nightmare is over, it will be gone. Okay. So not only have I fallen off the stage, now I've lost my place. I have got a big section in here I can leave out, which I may very well do. Okay, I would like to ask you all another question. Could you please put your hands up if you have ever lived in another country? It doesn't have to be a European country. Wow! Hands up if you've lived in more than one European country.
Including the UK?
Oh, I suppose so. Okay. Again, this is an amazing room of people, so I guess we're all on the same page. Okay. I've asked you this because I would like to talk a little bit about mobile citizens and rights now. It's not going to, hopefully not too boring. As a steering committee member of British in Europe, we work with the 3 million. That's another hat I have on. We've been involved in advocating for citizens' rights together with our friends since our inception in late 2016. It is fair to say, I think, that the subject of rights on Brexit is complex, legally intricate and politically challenging. I wrote a short opinion piece encompassing some of my thoughts on this subject, and it was published a few weeks ago. I was also inspired to write it after reading recently an article about the civil rights movement in the USA. And I guess you all know these, but I want to give you 2 quotes. The first one, John F. Kennedy. The rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. And the very, very wonderful Martin Luther King Jr. said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So, my article, I have cut it down. What are rights if they can be removed at the drop of a hat? So, prior to the EU referendum in 2016, the Leave campaign, as Hedvig said earlier, unequivocally stated that the legally exercised treaty rights of EU in UK and UK in the EU would not change, they would be protected. These statements were misleading and untruthful. What those inaccuracies highlighted were that many people, including high-ranking officials across government, did not, and still do not, understand what rights actually mean, nor do they understand the legal treaties that underpin these rights. So citizens' rights are our rights. They are civil, political and social rights, and they sit side by side with our human rights. These rights have developed over time to enable social inclusion and social citizenship, making for an inclusive and democratic society. So historically, human beings have fought and died for these rights, from LGBTQ+, did I get that right, Molly?
Yeah.
Thank you. To racial equality, to universal suffrage, naming but a few. Okay, there are still some countries in the 21st century without some or all of these rights, and one example now is the territory of Hong Kong. As we can see right now, the people are protesting about many inequalities, but above all, the key issue, again, rights, universal suffrage. Very important. So, we the 5 million, now, that's us all caught up in this situation, find ourselves in this precarious position where we will have lesser rights than before. If, and I'm going to say this, if the UK leaves the EU at all. Our voting rights have already been compromised. A large percentage of us were not allowed to vote in the referendum and were disenfranchised in a vote that affected our livelihoods, homes and families, inflicted on us by an intended advisory referendum, short on facts, impact studies and plans. And that's still the case over 3 years later. So what is now patently obvious is that we are in a situation of divergence and inequality. The UK has a population of approximately 65-66 million people. From that figure, 17.4 million voted to leave. In other words, 17.4 million people voted to remove rights from us, the 5 million, themselves, and importantly, the UK population as a whole. So there should be an outcry, an outpouring of defiance, but unfortunately it appears that this is either too complex an issue or apathy is prevailing. Which one do you think it is? Apathy. So, the Remain movement and citizens' rights groups all understand the implications and what is at stake, especially freedom of movement. Freedom of movement is not just about travelling or going on holiday. It's a life changer. It's two-way, not just into the UK, an entrance to studying or a much bigger job market, which is important. Those of us who have had the opportunity to use it know that it's not just for the privileged, it is for everybody, from all backgrounds and walks of life. And we, the British in Europe, are best placed to tell many of you about it, as we are 80% working age or younger, no longer the stereotypical expats. I won't fall off the stage again. We are immigrants. Times have changed, we've moved on, we know the benefits of immigration firsthand. We know how it creates diversity, openness and opportunity. Of all the EU countries, the UK has the largest diaspora. So there are 4.9 million of us. This is all the EU countries. The UK has the most people living abroad across the world. So we are flexible and fluid. Some of us don't always stay away permanently. Freedom of movement allows us all to come and go, to go where the work is. And history shows us that rights should be treasured and protected. Citizens of a country should never be placed in a position whereby they remove rights from their fellow citizens, or anybody else for that matter. Oh, hang on, where am I? I was on an important bit then. Hang on. Okay, so this is what I call for, apart from Stop Brexit. I call for Article 50 to be revoked now, because this is in theme with the rights, followed by a government-funded educational campaign informing people and the government themselves on how rights work. Then, only then, I think we may rediscover tolerance and common ground. This is sorely missing out of this debate, and putting people before politics where they should always have been at the forefront of any political dialogue. The values that unite human beings are, according to the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, but I've got it written down somewhere, human dignity, human rights, freedom, democracy, and something we're not seeing in the UK at the moment, the rule of law. Removing rights from people without their consent is undemocratic. It diverges from all the values mentioned, and here we go again, can I have a page turner please? And the opposite effect happens in equality. So we need to trust in each other again, we need to restore trust in our democratic process, and then maybe, just maybe, we can work together on equality, justice and fair play for all, giving balance and restoring hope. And no, I haven't finished. Moving on to values. As mentioned briefly in the article above, the European Union's fundamental values are respect for human dignity, human rights, freedom, democracy, equality and the rule of law. So, ever the optimist, I would like to think that these values are shared by all of us human beings and all of us in this room tonight, as they are the bedrock of any civilized society. They should be promoted and shared 1,000,000 times over. So if you're on social media, promote those EU values as hard and fast and everywhere that you can. And so, you know, that reason we feel so strongly in our group about remaining a member state and an equal partner, because it is more liberating than pulling up the blinking drawbridge. And that's how strongly the Remain campaign and the Remain groups feel about it. In 2017, our group was awarded the European Citizens' Prize by the European Parliament. I am mentioning this in the context of values. It's not about prizes, we are not here for that, but the main reason for awarding the prize, reasons are interesting, because every campaigner I have met over the last 3 years, and some are sitting here next to me and others in this room, encapsulate the main messages behind the award. Not forgetting the members of our groups as well. This is theirs too, it belongs to all of us. The reasons the European Parliament gave us the prize were activities promoting mutual understanding, closer integration between citizens of the member states, or facilitating cross-border or transnational cooperation with the European Union. Activities including long-term cross-border or transnational cultural cooperation, contributing to the strengthening of a European spirit. And finally, activities giving concrete expression to the values enshrined in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. What's not to like about any of those things? Nothing. So, according to the hundreds of replies I had anyway, when I put 3 research questions in my group before I came, they also agreed there was absolutely nothing wrong with any of those values, that we should all share and rejoice in them. So, to conclude, finally, breathe. We are in a dreadful mess, actually. We are. I mean, there's no getting away from it. We are really in a really dreadful mess. And those of us deeply involved in the pro-EU and citizens' rights campaigns have experiences that are indescribable in many ways. That people like that. We are none the wiser about our lives over 3 years down the line. Someone needs to do the right thing and show integrity, courage and fair play, because those are the very values we British have always cherished, but seem to have discarded somewhere. There is one positive thing, though, that in recent years have shown me. There are people that I have met that are caring, good, kind, thoughtful and intelligent. People that I knew previously that stand with us, even though they are not directly affected by Brexit. This is important. It gives us all hope for the future. We will prevail. And thank you. I'll end with the very wise words of the wonderful Mr. Nelson Mandela from Long Walk to Freedom. I know it seems an odd choice, but I don't think it is. So no one is born hating another person because of the colour of his skin, or his background, or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. I think we should all remember that. Thank you. Muchas gracias. Dankeschön,
Hi, I'd like to start just by thanking the organisers and thanking everybody for coming. I'll be touching on some of the subjects that we've heard about already, but I want to start really by talking about who are the British citizens who live in Spain. For a start, we don't even know how many of us there are. The figures would say it's 300,000, although that has recently gone up, as lots of people who were living under the radar are trying not to. But in truth, we don't really know. It's probably 2 or 3 times that number. So there could be as many as 1 million Brits actually living in Spain. I want to talk about some of the stereotypes and misconceptions about who we are. I'm 66, I've lived in Spain for 12 years, and I live on the coast. That is as far as it goes as to whether or not I'm a typical British citizen who lives in Spain. If you read the papers or see the media, you will think that we're all over 65, probably over 75, that we're all retired, that we don't speak any Spanish, we all play bowls, or bridge, or golf. We spend all our time in bars that are festooned with Union Jacks, or we're on the beach and we drink a lot of gin. Now some of that might be true, but most of it isn't. And it certainly doesn't apply to most of the Brits I know. And in terms of the age of the population, it's very misleading because, as Debbie mentioned, only 20% of the Brits in the EU are pension age, and in Spain it's slightly higher, it's 25%. So that means that 75% of the Brits in Spain are actually younger working people who don't necessarily live on the coast, who are integrated with Spanish society, who have Spanish friends, Spanish family, Spanish lives. And a lot of those people have children who are much more Spanish than they are British. So what you see in the papers is not always the truth. Most of us actually wouldn't go in one of those bars that you see, especially that one in Benidorm, if we would dine of thirst. Other misconceptions are about the country and its decision to vote for Brexit. We're constantly told that the majority of British citizens voted for it. Well, actually, it was only about 1/3 of the British voting population, and it was only about 1/4 of the entire British population. So to say that it's the majority is very misleading. Also, 60% of the British citizens who live in the EU weren't able to vote at all because they've lived in the EU for more than 15 years. And there is the impression, perhaps in Spain especially, that lots of the Brits that live here actually voted to leave. Well, yes, some of them did, but probably only about 25% of them. It's just they are the ones you see on the television and in the newspapers constantly. The Brexit that was sold to the British public was a fantasy, and we now have a much better understanding of what Brexit actually would look like and what the consequences of Brexit would be, whether that's to the country, the UK as a whole, or to us as individuals, and the effect it would have on our rights. But British citizens in the UK and in Spain and in the rest of Europe are actively fighting to stop this nonsense. And it's also another misconception that nothing would change if Brexit happened, that our rights would remain the same. Well, I can tell you for certain that is not true. We've already heard about some of the potential rights that we could lose. So with any deal, even if it was a good one, which seems rather unlikely, our rights would be diminished. So the only way to guarantee the rights that we have now is to stop this nonsense altogether. I'd like to talk briefly about our situation from the point of view of the Spanish. And by that I mean the Spanish government and the Spanish people. Firstly, I'd like to say to both, thank you, because we are made to feel welcome here. We do not have to put up with the kind of intolerance that EU citizens have to face in the UK. And whilst we do suffer a lot of the same issues and have a lot of the same concerns, that is not one of them. We are welcome here and we are grateful. We would also like to thank the Spanish government, who seem to be doing everything possible to protect our rights. Admittedly, the offer that's on the table that was in the Royal Decree back in March is only in the event of a no deal, and the big but is that it's contingent on the fair treatment of Spanish citizens in the UK. So, whilst we have every faith that the Spanish government are trying to do everything they can to protect us, it's not in their hands. It's in the hands of the UK government. So, Remain in Spain do not spend our time lobbying the Spanish government. We spend our time lobbying the British government, because this is all they're doing, and they are the ones that have our fate in their hands. There was an incident recently when the British government made an announcement about the healthcare for pensioners in the event of a no-deal Brexit. There was a blanket announcement to all Brits in the EU saying that our healthcare would be guaranteed for 6 months in the event of a no-deal Brexit. First of all, we were expected to be grateful for that. Sorry, no. Also, it rather contradicted what we'd already been told by the Spanish government, and it became obvious very quickly that the government had made a mistake and that this announcement only applied to British citizens in 26 of the 27 EU countries and not Spain. But despite us having the largest British community in Europe, they didn't bother to tell us. So, thankfully, the British Embassy in Madrid were very quick to act and to bring us up to date and to tell us to ignore what we'd just been told by the British government. It wasn't the case. But they didn't bother to correct their mistake. They just updated their website, and had we not known and had we not been able to tell people, then nobody would have been any the wiser. So you'll excuse if we don't trust the British government as far as we can throw them. Finally, I'd like to just talk about where we are now. Well, I've probably rewritten this section about 4 times in the last 4 days, because if I read the news now, I'd probably have to change it again, because things are changing so fast, it's a job to know where we are. But there's a few things I'd like to say that I'm personally convinced of. First of all, we are not leaving the EU on October the 31st. I was convinced we weren't leaving in March, and I was convinced we weren't leaving in April, and I'm equally convinced we're not leaving now. The deal, for want of a better word, that Boris Johnson has just presented to the EU is worse than what they've seen before and has been immediately rejected, as we all knew it would. I don't know why he thought any different, but he probably didn't. So we are in the situation where there's no deal apart from Theresa May's deal, which nobody in Parliament wants to sign up to. No deal has in effect been taken off the table as long as Boris Johnson doesn't break the law. And the EU are actively discussing an extension. And they are saying today it doesn't necessarily have to be Boris Johnson's signature on the request for an extension. So if you're worried that this is all in Boris Johnson's hands, I can assure you it is not. It is in the hands of the British Parliament, who will want to avoid a no deal at all costs. So there is everything to play for. Brexit is not inevitable, and the longer it gets delayed, the less likely it is to happen. An extension is now very likely. as is an election, and quite possibly a referendum. And we're not sure which will come first, but we need to get that extension secured, and that will be on the basis either of a general election or a referendum or both. So just to remind you, I love saying this, we are not leaving on the 31st of October. We didn't leave on March 29th. We didn't leave on April the 12th. We're not leaving in October, and I quite honestly believe we're never going to leave at all. Thank you.
Hola, soy Amy, soy de la asociación. No tengo un discurso, solo estaba escuchando y quería hacer un par de comentarios, porque estas mujeres han hablado mucho de... Ay, let's start again, I'm sorry. Okay. For those that can't speak English, you just got a short reprieve. But now I'm going to do it in English, of course. So, I'm from the association, my name's Amy, and I wanted to make a couple of comments about these lovely ladies, because they've been talking a lot about Brexit and our rights, or the rights of the EU citizens, etc. But they didn't say too much about themselves, and I was with them today with Mammon. We interviewed them in our radio program, and we learned about some incredible things that they've been doing. And some of these associations have actually posed legal challenges against Brexit that went to the High Court in different countries, in the UK and overseas. And that's incredible. And it's not just incredible because, you know, it happened. I think it's incredible if we just talk about these were people who had sort of other careers and other interests, and one day the Brexit happened and they stood up and said, I'm going to do something about this. And none of them are politicians, none of them are professional activists, and they just said, the time has come. Something like that, right? Yeah. You know, and since then, and that's just 3 years, you know, here they are, and they've done incredible things. So I just wanted to say, I think we should definitely give them a big round of applause. Okay, if I start speaking French, somebody Okay, we're going to have questions and answers, and so just while you're thinking about the questions you want to ask, there's just another couple of things. So the radio show that, the 2 radio programs that we recorded today at the studio will be on air. The first one will be tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. on Cultura FM, so it's cool, C-O-O-L-T-U-R-A, Cultura FM, at 101.8 in Barcelona area. And the second program will be on Monday at 9 a.m. Okay? And if you're going to forget that, just, you know, in our Facebook page and Facebook groups, we're publishing that, and afterwards, if you can't catch it live, we will post the link so you can listen to it as if it was a podcast. Okay? If anybody after the meeting tonight has any questions, just look for people with badges that are members of the association, and you can approach us and ask anything. I also personally wanted to say that I felt very disenfranchised by the UK with everything that's happened. I felt very alone, and I feel very honoured to have met you all, and that there are people who are out there sort of standing up for the rights. And so thank you very much on a personal level, and on behalf of, I'm sure, many people who are here who would like to say the same thing. Okay? Okay, so question time.
First of all, thank you, ladies. Your presentations were very moving and heartfelt, but I think you're talking to everyone in the room who feels like you do. did you ever consider taking your presentations to fringe meetings at the recent UK political conferences, where you could talk to people who need to hear these messages, whereas we all agree pretty much with everything you're saying?
You want to do that one? We have one. It's all right, I think we can manage without it. Is it that full of busy or we can manage it?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And we as the 3 million, at least I don't know other groups, but we as the 3 million, we were at all fringe events at the party conferences. And so we are definitely bringing the message there as well on behalf of the 3 million. But as said before, our fates are linked quite intimately.
Not so much for us as fringe events, but certainly we've been going everywhere we've been asked to speak. So universities, events of every type with different people, sometimes not necessarily Remainers. And it's because it's important, I agree, not to preach always to the converted, although I personally found that I've been to several events organized maybe by Remainers, and they had no idea of the intricacies and the rights they were losing. So sometimes it's very important to inform everyone, even those who think, okay, we agree with you, we voted, Remain, but they need to understand which rights are at stake and the impact this vote has had. So yes.
Yeah, I'd like just to add to what Hedvig said as well. British in Europe, our chair Jane Golding, she spoke at along with the 3 million at the Fringe Labour Party event. Jeremy Morgan, he was at the Lib Dem Fringe event, and I'm trying to think who. Christopher was at the Conservative Party event. Also, we've presented to the European Parliament last October. Where else have we? We've been everywhere. So it's a really good question, but we are there and we're on it. We're across it.
I'd just like to add one thing to that, and it's very important that we talk to politicians, but it's equally important that you do. Whether you've got an MP or not, write to them, write to your MP, write to your former MP. What's really important is, even if they don't reply, it's the quantity of correspondence they get, and it's really noticeable. And even if you never hear from them, I tell you honestly, it really makes a big difference. So don't rely on us to do all the talking for you. You need to do it for yourselves as well.
We can take next.
Thank you.
Hi. I'd like to say thank